Xiaomi's latest and greatest flagship smartphone, the Xiaomi 14, is finally here. It looks very similar to the previous generation, but in actuality, this phone packs a lot of upgrades here and there, like the cameras, the screen, that USB Type-C port, charging speed, and even the battery life are upgraded. Let's get into the details in today's video, starting with the design. Alright, so the Xiaomi 14 looks and feels very similar to its predecessor, and I can still use this phone with one hand. In a sense, it's still considered to be a small phone even though it is slightly bigger in all dimensions when compared to the Galaxy S24. Its shape is also very similar to the previous generation, but I gotta say this design is, well, it's gonna be even more familiar to many people in the year 2024. It is so similar to the point that when I look at the speaker grille alone, it reminded me of another phone. It is also available in a few colors, but we got the one in the plain white color. I'm not a fan of these labels here because it is in clear contrasting black color, and I think Xiaomi could have tried to make it less obvious since I don't want to look at that every time I take a look at the phone. So yeah. And that camera bump is also really thick. I think we should start measuring thickness of a phone with the camera bump included, because this is gonna be like a quarter or half of the phone's total thickness. Now the screen got an upgrade in terms of resolution too, bumped up to 2670 by 1200 pixels in resolution at 120Hz refresh rate while retaining the same OLED technology at 6.36-inch size. The overall screen brightness is around 1000 nits maximum, but the color accuracy is kind of not the best. It covers around 98% of sRGB and 71.71% of DCI-P3 color gamuts only, but the delta E number is extremely low. I'd say that this is an okay screen, as I have tested better screens at around the same size. What I truly dislike about this phone though is the under-display fingerprint scanner placement. It is way too low and it's just not ergonomic enough to use. But the performance of this phone though, wow, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is surely very powerful, but it also generates a lot of heat. Xiaomi has something called the Game Turbo, and we can tune the graphics a little bit. There's an option here to change the render resolution, but only to downgrade it to 720p. So we won't do that and stick with the default resolution instead. Overall, the performance is pretty decent, but this phone, again, it does get really hot. As mentioned in our gaming test video that you can watch at the top right corner there, we can play Genshin Impact at the highest graphical settings at 60 FPS, and we measured at around 45 degrees Celsius on the skin. No wonder my thumbs feel a bit toasty, because that is actually rather high considering that other phones are only at around 42 degrees Celsius at the screen side, the hottest spot. Now I also did the 3D Mark Wildlife stress test and I got this message on the screen. It also interrupted the test, so I had to redo a few times just to get a proper result for once. And from here we can see that the Xiaomi 14's thermal limit is extremely high at 55 degrees Celsius. That means it probably won't throttle as hard when we are playing games, but that also means our fingers will feel uncomfortable when we are playing those demanding games using this phone as well. The battery life is something that I'm sure many people are curious about. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is more efficient than the 8 Gen 2 if we're doing some less demanding tasks, but the Xiaomi 14 also got a slightly larger battery, but the screen's resolution is also higher than before. So, how's the battery life at the end of the day compared to its predecessor? Surprisingly, it can last an hour longer than its predecessor. Now, this is surprising to me because I didn't expect it to be such a big gap. The charging speed also got an upgrade to 90 watts, as there is a proprietary 90-watt charger in the box as well. If we just directly plug in the phone, then it will take around 40 minutes to complete the charging process, while the temperature is at around 40 degrees Celsius at its peak. However, the default isn't actually charging the phone at 90 watts. We'll have to head into the settings menu. What you do? Search for this option right here and then enable boost charging speed to get the actual 90-watt charging speed. Xiaomi also has this notice in the settings menu, and I think they know that fast charging in the long term is not healthy for your battery. So doing this charging test once more, we found out that it can reach to 100% faster, but the temperature peaks at around 45 degrees Celsius. And if you realize the charging process is only sped up until 30% and then it slows down before tapering off and complete the charging process. Now, what if we plug in our own USB PD charger? Well, there's no support for USB PD, unfortunately. So when we connected it to our 140 watts Ugreen GAN charger, this phone only takes in 18 watts average, sometimes jumping up to around 20 watts, but only for a short period of time, and it will take more than an hour to complete this charging cycle. I really do hope Xiaomi supports USB PD standard. It doesn't matter if it's not supporting the full 140 watts, maybe just support up to 65 watts of USB PD, it would be a lot better because a lot of laptops are also using 65 watts of USB PD nowadays. How about the software then? Well, it got upgraded to Xiaomi's HyperOS, but to me, it feels more like the same thing as MIUI but with a different name and a few facelifts here and there. The quick settings menu is now different from before, and the first thing I realized is there is no permanent settings menu button in this quick settings menu here. The settings menu became one of the tiles and we can actually move it around or literally just remove that button entirely. Not sure what's the rationale behind this, but I just find it weird. The same annoyances are still here too, like the 10-second timeout before I can press the OK button and all of those stuff. The virus scanner thing is also still present and I always find that to be really annoying. Oh, there's also one more new annoyance that I have to share with you guys. So for Android 14, you cannot sideload APKs like what we did last time, especially for older apps. So we have to use ADB. However, the brilliant engineers at Xiaomi wants us to enable that option in the developer menu. Okay, so I head into the developer options menu and try to enable sideload APK option here, but it tells me that I have to sign into my Xiaomi account and then I have to plug in my SIM card before I can enable this option. Why? Is this just to annoy us? Well, I can immediately rip out my SIM card after I have enabled this option, so I have no idea why putting in a SIM card is a thing that we must do before enabling this option. It just doesn't make sense. Now let's move on to the cameras. The sensors did get an upgrade and it also got upgraded to a laser autofocusing system too. This is a brilliant idea and we'll talk about this later because it kind of doubles as another function as well. I captured these pictures using Leica Vibrant unless otherwise stated because I like the vivid colors a lot more. So how do the pictures turn out? For daylight shots, the main camera is obviously gonna take great pictures. One thing that I don't really like is the exposure of this picture of the flowers because it's just a bit weird. Same goes to these oranges as well. They are just weirdly overexposed. This mall's hall is also oddly dim for whatever reason, but it's actually very bright there. Night shots are also good and the overall dynamic range is controlled properly, but the entire image in this shot is a bit too bright for my liking. However, the shot of this building though looks really good. I also want to highlight the depth of field of this shot in particular. It's quite intense since the aperture is only f1.6, and as shown in this sleeping dog's picture here, I can only focus on either the nose but not the eyes, and I gotta say the clarity and sharpness of the things that are in focus are actually looking really good, but the white balance, it's definitely not this yellow. Portrait modes also look absolutely stunning here, and I just want to put it out there because I think it looks amazing. As for the ultra-wide-angle camera though, it looks pretty good most of the time, though in some shots like this, it looks really dull. Both indoor shots, outdoor shots and also night shots also look good, although it does lack a little bit of sharpness. Overall, I would still say it is at a very high quality picture level. The telephoto camera is at 75mm, so it is a 3.2 times zoom from the main camera's 23mm focal length. And I think that it actually can take some good looking pictures. The clarity is great, and because it has OIS, taking long exposure night shots are easy as well. Slight wobbles will still show up in the image since my handshakes are also magnified by 3.2 times when compared to the main camera. I also want to highlight the lack of color consistency in these three cameras on the Xiaomi 14. These three pictures are taken in rapid succession and every photo produces a different set of colors and also dynamic range. As for the videography, it can take up to 4K 60fps videos or 8K 24fps, and I only took this video at night. I gotta say it could have been better because currently it's noisy like my niece and nephew, and the stabilization is just not that good. There's also a very weird glow around light sources. I have no idea where that came from as well. And a few more things to talk about before we end this review. While I was transferring all of the pictures and videos out from this phone, I was surprised to know that Xiaomi finally upgraded their phone to use a USB 3 port, and the transfer speed is superbly fast, so that's good. It also supports display output over USB-C, but since it doesn't have any special features like Samsung DeX to take advantage of it, it merely just mirrors your phone screen to the external monitor, and that's about it. And like many other flagship smartphones, it has a dual SIM card slot, but it does not have a microSD card slot and also no audio jack here. But remember the laser autofocus system at the back of this camera bump here? Well, that laser autofocus also doubles as the IR blaster for remote controls as well. Yes, there is no IR blaster at the top like what we have seen before because it is now in the laser autofocusing system. So, after going through all of our points, I can safely say that the Xiaomi 14 is actually a good phone. I wouldn't exactly call it compact since it is still larger in all dimensions compared to the Galaxy S24, especially with that thick camera bump. As for the price, they are as shown on the screen here. Honestly, I do think that it is at a very competitive price because the next best thing that you can buy with this amount of money is actually the Galaxy S24, which is more expensive than the Xiaomi 14, but still, the UI and software update policies are different between these two phones, so you have to consider that into the pricing as well. And that's all that we have to share with you in today's video. If you have any other questions regarding this phone, then do let me know down in the comment section below. And do remember to do the usual liking and subscribing because we'll see you guys in the next video as well. So, goodbye.